Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the top topics of November 11th, 2021. So, I will be discussing with you the series 2 of the State of the Police Report 2019, which is very important from your General Studies Paper 3 internal security point of view, because police play a very important role in the internal security system, and they are the first point of reckon for any citizen during the time of crisis. Africa, India call for 1.3 ton per year in per year in climate finance from the rich countries. This is an important development coming from the COP26. Union Cabinet brings back MPLAD scheme, and this is a good news, especially for development projects at the ground level. Delhi declaration at the regional security meet of the National Security Advisors on Afghanistan. Union Cabinet brings back MPLAD scheme. I'm sorry, I've repeated again. India is to work towards zero emission cars by 2040. Now, this is an important development, keeping India's commitment in Panchamrit. India-US monitoring defense trade projects. So yesterday I was speaking about the State of the Police report in 2019, which I gave you certain insights on the manner of infrastructure, the technology, and also the lack of higher level officials and the ratio of the constabulary to the higher level officials, etc. So those points you can see in November 10th video. Today I will be discussing you certain findings about the police personnel again in this report. So as we know that rule of law is the foundation of a just and a democratic society, it requires a very fair and an effective criminal justice system in which the police have a very central role to play. Now, police is a state subject and it is the most recognizable face of the state with respect to law and order. Police station is a citizen's first point of contact in the hour of crisis, and therefore a robust police system is very important for the proper implementation of the rule of law. Now, looking at certain findings about this report today, I will be covering the service conditions of the personnel, including the average working hours, about the weekly rest, overtime work. So the report says that there has been undue pressure imposed on the senior officers by the senior officers on the junior personnel, and the level of abuse of the senior position by officers. These points also cover responses of the family members of the personnel on issues such as work-related stress, personal ability to spend time with family, and satisfaction with the staff quarter. So basically, the conditions for service and the working will be senior. Let us see some important findings about this report now. If you can see in the right side box, I've given you important findings. It says that the police personnel work for 14 hours a day on an average, with about 80% of the personnel working for more than 8 hours a day. So just like somebody who's preparing for civil services, the number of hours that we usually put before the examination or something, this is really huge. Now, except Nagaland, the average working hours of the police personnel is between 11 to 18 in all the selected 21 states. Nearly 1 of the 2 personnel work overtime regularly, while 8 out of 10 personnel do not get paid for overtime work. And maybe this is also the reason why corruption is also high among the police personnel. Nearly 3 out of 5 respondents from the families of the personnel were dissatisfied with the government providing housing quarters. So when the police personnel, as we see, are putting more than 14 hours a day, it is definitely the responsibility of the government to provide them the proper amenities so that they can do their job very dedicatedly. Now, 1 of the 2 personnel do not get a weekly off. This is also a very sad finding, I would say, because as persons working on the ground level and dealing with tough situations, you need a break. 3 out of 4 police personnel believe that their workload is affecting their physical and mental health. Yes, this does. because even the mind and the body needs rest. So if you keep on expecting persons to work continuously without any break, it will definitely have um, impact on not only the physical but also the ability, the cognitive or the mental ability to decide things, to behave. So, one of the four personnel reported that the police personnel, that is senior police personnel, asked their juniors to do their household and personal jobs, even though they are not meant for it. SC, ST, OBC personnel are more likely to report this than the other castes. So, you can see that there are discriminations on the basis of this, and it is unethical on the police personnel to use the government machinery, that is the police, the lower ranks of the police personnel is definitely the government machinery. Using them for the personal work is an unethical issue and is not a part of what they should do on the duty. 2 in 5 personnel report the use of bad language by senior officers. This is again an unethical thing, because in any organization, respect is the most important, and you lay an example to your juniors or the people below you through your behavior, your language, etc. 37% of personnel willing to give up their jobs for any other provision if the perks and salaries remain the same. So definitely with this existing workload, with the type of treatment that they are meted out and without any break, obviously people will want to give up the jobs, and this is very bad and also lays a remark on the police system and the manner in which the personnel are managed. So these are some important findings about the service conditions, and definitely this is going to help you to write a very good answer with respect to governance, because implementation of rule of law is the most important part of governance, and also internal security, the basic organization of internal security has to be properly organized. The service conditions have to be good, and also the police personnel, the personnel manning this organization, have to be motivated if they want to really implement the rule of law in a proper manner. So these are the important findings which will help you to write a good answer in internal security or even in governance, and even police being an important, because even in GS paper 3 we have an important topic, that is the various security forces, so police being one of them. Let us go to the next important news now. Africa and India call for 1.3 trillion per year in climate finance from rich persons. As we've been seeing that since the COP26 meeting and even prior to that, climate finance has been a very important discussion. Why? First thing, it has been demanded since the Kyoto Protocol, and the developed countries have not stayed to the word of even 1 billion per year. Climate finance has not been transferred properly to the developing and the poor countries. Second point, these countries are the most vulnerable because they do not have proper money to deal with the adaptation, mitigation, and also the impact of climate change, unlike the developed countries who have their system already robustly developed against such things. Fourthly, because of COVID, already the economies of the poor and the developing countries have been impacted. So now it is an even stronger call from the countries such as Africa and India that now the developed countries have to stand by their word to provide timely finance to these poor and developing countries if they want them also to contribute to the climate change mitigation actions, that is keeping the temperatures within boundary. So let us see what does Africa and India call for regarding the climate finance. And climate finance, without finance you cannot take any step with related to dealing with adaptation, mitigation projects, and also dealing with the impact and developing technologies, renewable energies. Everything needs money, and now it is the developed countries' responsibility to stay the word. So while the developed countries have failed to put together even 100 billion per year in climate finance, as promised, African nations and some developing countries like India have put up a figure of enhanced flow of finance that the developed countries must deliver in the coming year, that is at least 1.3 trillion per year from 2030. So it's almost like 8 years after. Now, the group of 24 nations that call themselves as like-minded developing countries, and as well as countries from Africa, put forward this demand in a proposal for enhanced finance flows that they are pushing for inclusion in the decisions that will be agreed at the climate conference in Glasgow. Now, the like-minded developing group of developing countries, or the LMDC, is the group of developing countries who organize themselves as bloc negotiators in international organizations and United Nations and WTO. They represent more than 50% of the world's population. The member countries of the like-minded group are Algeria, Bangladesh, Belarus, Bhutan, China, Cuba, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Syria, Vietnam, and Zimbabwe. Now, India is also a part of the LMDC, as we can see. So, these countries say that the developed countries, which are obligated to provide financial resource to the developing world in dealing with climate change, must be asked to mobilize at least 1.3 trillion per year by 2030. The proposal also says that a significant amount of this should be in the form of grants. Grants are the gifts that are not paid back. The developing countries have also demanded that climate finance must be clearly defined and it should not be mixed up with other kinds of existing financial flows. Now, the Paris Agreement says climate finance being mobilized by developed countries must be new and additional. So, a US dollar 232 million was pledged for the adaptation fund, which is meant to finance adaptation projects in developing countries. Now, if this materializes, this will be the highest amount of money ever flowing into the adaptation fund. Now, adaptation fund finances the projects and programs that help the vulnerable communities in developing countries to adapt to climate change. Initiatives are based on countries' needs. The Adaptation Fund was established under the Kyoto Protocol of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, the Adaptation Fund finances the projects and programs that will help the communities to adapt. The fund is financed largely by the government and private donors, and also a 2% share from the proceeds of the certified emission reductions issued under the protocol's Clean Development Mechanism project. The Adaptation Fund was established under the Kyoto Protocol of the UNFCCC. So, apart from this Adaptation Fund, let us see what are the other instruments of finance. Now, the Global Environmental Facility has served as an operational entity of financial mechanisms since the convention's entry into 1994. At the COP16, the parties established the Green Climate Fund and in 2011 also designated it as an operating entity. So, in today you can try to write an answer about climate finance, what is being demanded at the COP26, and what are the mechanisms, which include Adaptation Fund, your Green Environmental Facility, the Green Climate Fund. So, little by little you can develop on your answer writing. Let us see climate finance will help how. Now, climate finance will help in developing projects for climate change resilience, conservation of biodiversity, climate change mitigation, sustainable transportation system or EVs, adaptation to climate change, building renewable energy products, developing agriculture in a sustainable way, and most of all, building energy efficiency. So the finance will help in these activities. So you have a full-fledged answer that you can attempt. Next is Delhi Declaration at the National Security Advisors meeting. Now, the Delhi Declaration was adopted by the Regional Security Council meeting on Afghanistan, which was conducted in Delhi, that is India, by the NSAs, and said that the participants have discussed the evolving situation in Afghanistan, especially the security situation and the regional and global ramifications. They paid special attention to the current political situation in Afghanistan and also discussed the threats arising from terrorism, radicalization, drug trafficking, as well as the need for humanitarian assistance. So, for your answer, I think it's important first of all to remember why. Why is this meeting actually happening in Afghanistan? Because of the threats as I've defined now. And what are the decisions that have been taken? Now we will be discussing them in a summary form, which is the Delhi Declaration on this. Let's see what did the countries actually agree in the Delhi Declaration. So first let me remind you that the meeting was again attended by Iran, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. It will be very good if you try to draw a map also, which will be very important in presentation of your answer. Just a rough map of the Central Asia, the neighboring countries of Afghanistan. So let us see what did the Delhi Declaration say. It was a statement agreed by all the NSAs from these countries, and they discussed the evolving situation. They paid special attention to the current political situation in Afghanistan and threats and arising from these. So it's very important first to identify the threats, and based on these threats, these following decisions have been decided at. So let's see one by one. They reiterated the strong support for a peaceful, secure, stable Afghanistan, which is these three keywords, emphasizing respect for sovereignty, unity, integrity, again underlining these three keywords, non-interference in international affairs. Yes, this is important. They expressed deep concern for the suffering of the people in Afghanistan arising from the security situation. There's a refugee problem, equitable rights for women and children, especially education, and condemned the terrorist attacks on Kandahar, Kabul and Kunduz. Now they emphasize Afghan's territory should not be used for sheltering, training, planning and financing of terrorist acts. They condemn the strongest forms of terrorist activities, reaffirm their firm commitment to combat terrorism in all its forms of manifestation, including financing, dismantling of terrorist infrastructure, countering radicalization to ensure Afghanistan would never become a safe haven for global terrorism. They called for collective cooperation against the menace of radicalization, extremism, separatism, drug trafficking, all these four which give a push to terrorist activities. They stressed the necessity for an open, truly inclusive government and represents the will of all the people in Afghanistan and have representation from all sections of the society, which is not the present government what they have formed, including major political forces in the country. Inclusion of all the sections of society in administration and political structure is important for successful national reconciliation. They recalled relevant UN resolutions in Afghanistan and they noted that United Nations has a very central role to play in Afghanistan and its continued presence in the country must be preserved, keeping in mind that the US has left and now the security is in a critical manner there. They emphasize the importance of ensuring that the fundamental rights of women, children, minority are not violated. They express the concern that over the deteriorating socio-economic and humanitarian situation and underline the needs to provide urgent humanitarian assistance for the Afghanistan. They reiterated that humanitarian assistance should be provided direct and assured manner and the assistance should be distributed within the country in a non-discriminatory manner. They reiterated the commitment to provide assistance to Afghanistan to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So these are the important discussions and decisions on which they have been decided to collectively, but it is to be seen how these are going to be implemented because they haven't said anything about the finance or the mechanisms or what steps each country or collectively they are going to take. Anyway, this decisions has been agreed to collectively at this meeting, but then what is going to be the implementation mechanism, how they are going to strategize this, that needs to be further. So just taking decisions will not work. but implementation is more important on the ground because already the situation in Afghanistan is critical. Now, Union Cabinet has brought back the MPLAD scheme, and it has brought cheers on the faces of the MPs because they have the money to implement in their constituencies, which not only leads to development of the local level projects but also is an important form of vote garnering during the elections. So the government has decided to restore the MPLAD scheme, and each MP will get 2 crore for development activities for the remainder 2021-22 and annually for 5 crore thereafter. So this year only 2 crores, and from next year onwards until 25-26 they will get 5 crore. Now the MPLAD scheme was suspended temporarily in April 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and its funds went into the Consolidated Fund of India, something which is mentioned in the Constitution. Now the Prime Minister Modi decided to restore the scheme for the remaining part of 21-22 and the until 25-26, that is the term of the 15th Finance Commission. Under the scheme, all the MPs will recommend development programs involving expenditure of 5 crore every year in their constituencies. The MPLAD scheme is entrusted with the responsibility. The MPLADs, the division under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, has the responsibility to implement the scheme. Under the scheme, each MP has a choice to suggest to the district collector works which are tune of 5 crore per annum to be taken up in his constituency. Now a Rajya Sabha member can recommend works in one or more districts in the state from which he has been elected. Nominated member of Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha may select one or more districts from any state in the country from implementation of their choice under the scheme. The ministry issued the guidelines including implementation and monitoring. MPLAD scheme is a central sector scheme and it is fully funded by the Government of India. The objective is to enable the MPs to recommend works of development to emphasize on creating durable community assets like drinking water, primary education, public health, sanitation, roads and in the constituencies. The annual MPLADS fund for MP per constituency is 5 crore and this is released in 2 installments of 2.5 crore each, subject to fulfillment of certain conditions. So it was suspended during the COVID-19 and the fund was placed at the disposal of the Ministry of Finance for managing the impact of COVID-19. Now, as the country now is on the road to economic recovery and the scheme continues to be beneficial for creation of durable community assets, the fulfilling of aspirations of locally felt needs of community in skill development, creation of jobs thereby help to achieve the objective of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, according to the Cabinet, it has decided to restore the scheme and this term is coterminous with 15th Finance Commission, as I've said. So, what is the importance and what will be the impact? First of all, the MPs will get money to restart the community development projects which has been left or stopped because of the COVID. They will restart fulfilling the aspirations and requirements of local community and create durable projects with primary objectives. They will help to revive the economy because creating the projects will lead to also rural the employment in these areas where the projects are coming up. So the next important again is something with regard to the electric vehicles. Now India is working towards zero emissions cars by 2040. So most probably in another 20 years, I think we will have more demand for electric vehicles. Let's see what the country has decided. Now India has joined over 30 countries in signing a declaration that promises to work towards ensuring that only zero emission cars and vans are sold by the year 2040. However, this timeline is mainly for the developed countries signatories and it is not a legally binding commitment. Emerging markets like India have only promised to work intensely towards the proliferation and adoption of zero emission vehicles. Now, the declaration was held at the climate conference underway at Glasgow and it is one among the many voluntary initiatives that the different set of countries are launching at the meeting. So road transport, the importance of electric vehicle is important because Apart from energy, road transportation, which uses petrol, diesel, accounts for 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and significant reduction from the sector is very essential to keep the global temperature rise within the 2 degrees centigrade from pre-industrial levels. Now, at the initiative of UK government, the COP26, India also joined the Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Council. Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Council that will help to push towards early adoption of the zero emission vehicles. Now, in the declaration, emerging economies like India called on developing countries to strengthen collaboration and support to facilitate global, equitable, and just transition towards zero emission vehicles. So some of the major companies like Ford, General Motors, Mercedes, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo have already signed the declaration, promising that they will work towards 100% zero emission new car and van sales to the leading market by 2025. This is somewhat of a good news because this will lead to more development, investment in the transportation sector, and also maybe new jobs. So, however, 3 of the leading car makers like United States, China, Japan are not part of this initiative. Now, this is again a backdrop because US as last time it also adhered to the Paris Agreement very lately, and this again poses a question mark about the commitment from these committees to really reduce the global emissions. So I think they should be able to play an example for the other countries to join in rather than backing out on such initiatives. Now, a few years earlier, India had also announced its plan of 100% transition to electric vehicles by 2032. But considering the impossible target or the task, it was modified to 30% of all passenger cars and 70% of commercial vehicles will be becoming electric in India by 2030. Introduction of electric two-wheeler vehicles and three-wheelers is also being pushed in a new way. So this is something about cleaner transportation. As you can see, because we have sustainable development goals to make the cities sustainable and resilient, and therefore transportation plays a very big role in this. So you can attempt an answer, very simple words, 100 words about clean transportation and how you can help to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions to keep the temperatures within the targeted 2 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial levels. These decisions will help you. You can add points such as the council, which I've just told about, Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Council, and also steps taken by India, for example, like FAME program, National Electric Mobility Policy, etc. So this will help you to cover 100 words. Now the last and final thing is about the defense cooperation between US and India. Now, APART has the coordination and development of defense equipment under the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative (DTTI). India and US has agreed to revise the statement of intent to strengthen the dialogue on defense technology cooperation. We know that how the government is looking at Atmanirbharta in the defense sector with more of Make in India, and also its coordination and cooperation, especially with other countries with respect to technology transfer, will help the initiatives of the government back home. So let's see. Now this was agreed at the 11th DTTI group meeting between India and US that was held. Now the aim of the group is to bring sustained leadership focus on bilateral defense trade relationship and create opportunities for co-production, co-development of defense equipment. The statement noted. Now 4 joint working groups focused on land and naval, aircraft technologies that have been established under DTTI to promote mutually agreed projects. The meeting was actually held normally twice a year, alternating between India and US. However, this meeting was held via video conferencing because of COVID-19. So we know that India and US have been improving their bilateral cooperation, especially with respect to defense. In US in 2016 recognized India as a major defense partner, which commits US to facilitate technology sharing with India. This is an important point. This will help the government to push its Atmanirbharta program because the technology comes in. Then the other Also, defense relationship is a major emerging pillar in India-US strategic partnership. With the signing of the new framework of India-US defense relationship in 2025, the two countries also, the defense framework agreement was updated and renewed. The two countries also conduct bilateral exercises with each other. India participated in the RIMPAC exercise, and also there is bilateral defense dialogue that is held in production, joint working, security, technology security transfer, etc. Then logistics exchange memorandum of association was signed. Fuel exchange agreements were signed between India and US. So these are some of the important points of defense cooperation between India and US, and also how this will help in pushing the goal of Atmanirbharta, especially with respect to defense in India. So this brings me to the end of topics for November 12th. I shall see you all with another list for November 12th. Until then, bye-bye.